evening, ladies and gentlemen. Deathly silence makes me very nervous. Take a seat, thank you. You don't have to take your hat off, but you can leave it over. Welcome to this True Confessions evening. I'm going to let it all hang out. I hope you all know what you're in for. Well, I was just reading this here article that calls me the most famous playwright in the world. I hope Gorbachev sees that. Of course, I wouldn't have objected if it had said the best playwright. As you can see, I don't believe in false modesty. Well, it's certainly nice that we can have this here little visit, even though I'm really a very private person. Now that's hypocritical. Nowadays, I have an almost insatiable hunger for recognition of the fact I still exist. It's exhausting, though. I need to save my energy for my work. But when you're younger, you know, there's quite enough of you to go around. Now I must write in the mornings as much as I can. The only thing I do besides write is swim. And I swim better than I write these days, if one is to believe the critics. Yes, I have simply emerged after a long period of deep depression, and I'm living again and glad to be alive. I'm sure some of you know about depression. One can go on that way just so long. Prolonged depression is almost as difficult as prolonged happiness. Well, it's good to be here anyway. I just flew in from Hollywood, you know. I stayed too long, 4 hours. Someone once told me, now, is this true? That if you hang out long enough on a corner of this coast, sooner or later a seagull will fly over and shed a pot of gold on you? I always wanted to use that in a play, but judging from the overreaction, I guess I better not. I have some fond memories of Hollywood. Not very many, but some. When I was first starting to get paid as a writer, my agent, Audrey Wood, sold me to MGM for $250 a week. Well, that's more money than I'd ever heard of. I was assigned to write a screenplay based on a frightful novel for Miss Lana Turner. I was supposed to invent sexy new situations that would somehow pass the census office. Sort of a celluloid brassiere for her to appear in, I suppose. Well, I worked on the script for several weeks and thought it was pretty good, all things considered. But I was soon informed by the producer that my dialogue was beyond the great lady's comprehension. I'd only used words with 2 syllables. Then they asked me if I had a story idea for Margaret O'Brien. Oh, I did indeed, but it was unprintable. Margaret O'Brien, deliver me from child actors. Well, anyway, I called Audrey, my agent, and asked her to request MGM's permission for me to go back east to see one of my plays that was being produced experimentally. They said yes on one condition, that he doesn't come back. But with the money I saved, I was able to write The Glass Menagerie, so I suppose I owe Leo the Lion something. I bet you didn't know that The Glass Menagerie was originally conceived of as a screenplay. Yes, I was going to call it The Gentleman Caller, or The Not So Beautiful People, something like that. Well, MGM rejected my treatment, so I adapted it to the theater, incorporating some ideas for staging that I'd learned from writing screenplays. I think the play was very much influenced by being written first for the screen, which is a funny thing because it's one of the plays I'm most famous for. The films of my plays have usually been disappointing to me. After Menagerie was a big hit on Broadway, though, MGM was one of the studios bidding for it. A couple of years earlier, they could have had it for the price of my salary. Well, what shall we talk about? Nowadays, I'm usually bombarded immediately with questions about sex, death. Well, in my case, maybe they're similar. No, everyone is always so titillated by sex, especially homosexuality, so let's get that little demon out in the open first. Am I homosexual? I don't know how that rumor got started. As I told David Frost on national TV, I covered the waterfront, David. And as Blanche said in Streetcar, straight, What is straight? A line can be straight or a street, but the heart of a human being? Oh, no. But I have never felt that a person's sexual preferences, perhaps his aberrations, depending on the perspective of those judging, were at all pertinent to his creative artistry. However, those who are more creative in art may well be more creative in their sexual pursuits. I don't know. God, that's deep, isn't it? But I would like to make it perfectly clear that I have never played around with my actors. Rumors to the contrary. It's a point of morality with me, and besides, it would be most unprofessional. But there was one quite famous who tried. No, I don't condone anyone in the profession using their actors as sexual objects. The assistant stage manager, yes, but that's another matter. No, I'm really very puritanical about professional relationships in the theater. Besides, actors are such children. I like Dorothy Parker's line, scratch an actor and you'll find an actress. You know, shyness with people has always been my great problem, especially with actors. Except with Brando. He was always shy with me. I don't know why. I remember one morning at the Provincetown, just before we started rehearsing Streetcar Named Desire, he asked me to walk up the beach with him, so we did. In total silence. Then we walked back. Again in silence. Actors are weird. But I loved Vivian Lee. So beautiful. She had an instinct for doing or saying the one right thing to put you at ease, even when you knew you were making a fool of yourself. She had perfect grace and tragic style, and she knew madness too. I don't care much about meeting or getting to know famous people anymore. Though there was one I can tell you about who definitely was not a disappointment to me. I always remember the day I met Greta Garbo. It was George Cukor who'd arranged it for me. He was a dear friend of hers, the one director I thought she might return to the screen for. So I told Cukor that I had written a screenplay called, I believe, The Pink Bedroom. Anyway, I thought it was perfect for Garbo to make her return in. She received me at the Ritz in New York. She read through my script as we sat there, smiled from time to time, was deeply engrossed, seemed pleased. Suddenly she finished, put it down, looked at me and said, "Wonderful." Well, I thought I could hear my own heart beat, and she looked straight in my eyes and said, "Wonderful." Give it to Joan Crawford. Garbo's no was more exciting than another woman's yes. Now then, of course, there was dear lost Tallulah. Tallulah was great fun, but she could be exhausting. I don't think anyone ever really knew Bankhead. Well, she always impressed me by her honesty and by her gallantry. She never hesitated to speak what she felt to be the truth, no matter what the possible hurt to herself, because when you speak the truth, it is you, the speaker, who is most likely to be hurt. And she had an utter lack of shame, a quality I have observed in a number of Southern ladies I've known. Oh, I suppose you could describe Tallulah as a tramp, but only in the elegant sense of the word. Someone once said that I sounded like a cross between Tallulah and Senator Dirksen. And she loved to shock people. One time, the Lumps went backstage to meet her, and on purpose, I'm sure, she met them at the door stark naked. Still, Winwood came flittering in. Oh, I don't know why she does that. She has such pretty frocks. She was wicked. One of the wittiest women I've ever known. One time, I asked her if she thought that a certain leading man of hers was gay. She just looked at me and replied, "How could I possibly know, darling? I have never slept with him." Outrageous woman. Probably why we got along so well. It's sad that she destroyed herself so quickly. Well, as she once said, "If I had my life to live over, I would make the same mistakes, only sooner." Originally, you know, I had Tallulah in mind to play Blanche in Streetcar, but she didn't get around to playing it till years later in a revival. By then, it was simply too late. I'm sure that attack on Blanche Dubois being a drag queen started after Tallulah played her. No, I have read things that say that Blanche was a drag queen, that George and Martha and all these Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf were a pair of homosexuals. These charges are absolutely ridiculous. If I am writing a female character, goddammit, I'm writing a female character, not a drag queen. If I wanted to write a drag queen, I would write a drag queen. As a matter of fact, I am. Any writer with the gift of creating character is perfectly capable of drawing from both the male and female components of his psyche. I know I have always been able to, and I'm not faking either. My women characters are women, totally female, and my male characters are totally male. Get some soul set. Let's see, where was I? Oh, yes, let's get back to the titillating part, shall we? Seriously, though, my first great affection was for my college roommate, Green Eyes. He was a youth with incredibly large green eyes that blazed in the dark. If he even touched me, I trembled like a leaf, but that's about as far as it ever went. Once, he tried to kiss me, but I shoved him away. I was so puritanical. Well, in those days, you see, the only sexual encounters we had were sordid experiences with syphilitic old whores. Well, some of you find that shocking. Well, the truth is shocking. I tell the truth, and people are shocked. I do publicly what other people do privately. Extravagance is everything in life to me. I don't like middle things. I like excesses. I would do just about anything not to bore people. Certainly hope I don't bore you. I shall try to refrain from telling you too much trivia. But it's amazing how much of one's life is trivia. Ordinarily, I'm a painfully shy person, and my extreme shyness makes me difficult to know. Well, to protect myself, I often attack first before I can be hurt. Some of the bluster when I get angry at someone is simply because I'm angry. The person has made me shy. It's not possible to be something different from what you are. The trick is making it work for you instead of against you. It's a trick I have never learned. However, I do think that early sexual repression may have been an important factor in my work. It forced the immense drive and frustration and guilt that I felt into my writing. Oh, I had sexual feelings very early, and I was always thinking about it, but I never had any real experience until my late 20s. From then on, you might say I made up for lost time. I had the sex life of Catherine the Great. But before that, I was the shyest person in the world. I could have expired from embarrassment. Sexuality was dominant in my work because I wasn't getting any, baby. I think I could have found satisfaction with women. Though I only had one completely consummated affair with a woman, and that was in college, the University of Iowa. The whole thing only lasted a few months. Oh, but before that, there was Hazel, my childhood sweetheart. I had a long, intensely emotional love for her from the age of 11 all the way up until college. During my first week in college, I proposed a marriage to Hazel by mail. She sent me an appreciative note. A negative response, she married someone else. Our relationship had been incredibly pure. During our many years of courtship, I was allowed to kiss her on the lips only twice a year. At Christmas and on her birthday. Now, in retrospect, I suspect she was being coquettishly demure in order to inspire in me a more aggressive response to her charms. I remember in particular one afternoon in St. Louis when we visited the art gallery, there was a male statue there, and if one knew his fig leaf was hinged, one could lift it up and view what hung beneath. Well, Hazel knew. She lifted that fig leaf and asked, "Is yours like this?" Well, my only reply was a maidenly blush. Then I met Betty. Betty was a nymphomaniac. I was totally satisfied, but she dismissed me after 2 months in favor of a new stud. Well, can you imagine? I tried to date other girls after that, but somehow I didn't manage. I suppose I didn't appeal too strongly to them, and I found I appealed more to men. But I've been heterosexual. I know how. But believe me, I have had enough one-night stands in my life to tell you that they are meaningless. Promiscuity is a distortion of the love impulse, and I am a very moral man. Of course, one must have a few little adventures. That's because of the animal in each of us, and man is closer to the animal than woman. But I remember many times when I took someone home with me, not especially for sex, but because I didn't want to be alone. I can't be alone. I go mad if not alone. I have this fear of dying alone, of suffocation. I need to be touched and held and embraced. Touch is very important in life. It's all we have in trying to reach out to another person. Love has been precious to me when I could get it. But sex has been very important in my life too, and now I have to pay for it. Believe me, at my age, you pay for it in one way or another. But the way I look at it is, if all the people in the world are lonely who appear to be lonely, then it's inexcusably selfish to be lonely alone. But sex is no longer the governing force of my life. Work and human intimacy are the most important. Even when love did come, work was my primary concern. Writing is my life. Failure, my death. A desperate writer, that's what I am. When I can't write, that is the most terrible thing. When I can't write, I am filled with self-loathing. And how does one cope? This is what's important in life, how one copes. You never get used to a critical world that turns thumbs down. If they don't like your work, it's worse than if they said your child was homely. So you must despise them. You must despise them first before they can despise you, and you must believe yourself better than they are. You can't go on. But I don't think anyone has ever known, maybe Elia Kazan, how desperately much my work meant to me and treated it with the necessary sympathy or feeling. And there are moments when that sympathy or feeling from someone else is very important and precious. But my work and habits are so very private. You know I would much prefer discussing with you the most intimate details of my sex life, because the work to me is more personal. Well, can you understand that? I have always been leery of discussing my professional life. Probably because I'm afraid it might be startled away. I am a compulsive writer. Or perhaps a compulsive typist. But I will tell you this much. I like to work on an old beat-up portable typewriter and to speak the lines as I go along. Sometimes I'll even get up, act out all the characters. Must be quite a sight. But I have to hear my lines spoken before I know they're true. After a while, when I've heard the lines spoken many times, they seem more real to me than anything that happens to me in what is called real life. Usually when asked about the themes of any of my plays, I just kind of look vague and say, oh, it's a play about life. I can tell you, though, that I have always put a great deal of my own persona into my work. But what else is the creative artist to do? I mean, all truly creative work represents the artist's need to express those things most involved in his own experience. Otherwise, the writing, no matter how well executed, is a manufactured, synthetic product. I believe that the writer's responsibility is to put the essence of his experience as a human being into his work. He succeeds when a wide audience can somehow feel and understand this essence and believe in its truth. Now, to convey this essence, I use a lot of symbols. I know, perhaps I overdo them, but symbols are nothing more than a way of saying something more directly, simply, more beautifully. Without my symbols, I might still be employed by the International Shoe Company in St. Louis. But symbols are not my only excess. I have so many. During the first rehearsals on Sweet Bird of Youth, I couldn't stand it. I cried out, "Stop it! It's dreadful! It's so overwritten!" And it was so brilliantly acted and directed that the florid writing became true. Characterization, I think, is my greatest strength. I know the characters in my plays far better than I know myself. But I created them, not myself. But when I was writing Streetcar Named Desire, I was possessed. And I thought I was dying, and in spite of this, perhaps because of it, I wrote with a great passion, and I was possessed by this demonic creature named Blanche Dubois. Well, the size of her feeling was too great for her to contain without the escape into madness. Human relationships are terrifyingly ambiguous, and if you write a character that isn't ambiguous, you are writing a false character, not a true one. One never knows what will provide your source of inspiration. An overheard bit of conversation, some words on a sign. It's a good thing New Orleans didn't have a bus named Desire. Actually, until the last moment, I was thinking of calling the streetcar the poker night. Well, that's what I thought of it as all along, but a streetcar named Desire it was meant to be. I just didn't know it. People usually ask me which of my plays is my favorite. Oh, I suppose it must be Cat on the Hot Tin Roof, but in the published version. For the stage, I was persuaded to make some changes in the third act that were always offensive to me. But Cat won the Critics' Award and a Pulitzer Prize, so I shan't complain too loudly. You know, now in my work, I have always had an affinity for the female psyche. Some people think that homosexuals don't like women, but that's erroneous. I like women and understand the women better than men. Well, I think they're more complicated and they suffer more. Life is harder for them and they are more feeling, but what I have always liked best in a woman is that special tenderness they have. Only a woman has that tenderness. Now, the reason that I like young men is for their male energy and a certain enthusiasm that I never found in a woman. An advantage of being a homosexual is that I saved all that alimony. Funny thing though, one of the first things I ever sold was an article to Smart Set magazine called "The Type of Woman a Man Wants to Marry." I don't remember what I said, I was 17, but I got $35 for it. Emotionally, I have always felt closer to women. I think that's very apparent in my work. I've loved them very deeply. I'm frequently asked why I write about frustrated women. The answer is, I don't. Frustrated is almost exactly what the women I write about are not. I mean, for instance, what is frustrated about Amanda Wingfield in The Glass Menagerie? Oh, maybe the conditions in which she found herself were frustrating, but certainly not her spirit. And Blanche in Streetcar about as frustrated as a jungle beast. After the death of her young husband, she was having sex with every male in sight. She felt responsible, had to absolve herself. Well, she called him disgusting after he confessed his relations with an older man and he went out and shot himself. As far as Miss Alma goes in Summer and Smoke, she's a particular favorite of mine, but Miss Alma, she was only frustrated because she came out so late. I can identify with that. The only form of sex I disapprove of is sadism. I don't like being forced to do anything. I also can't stand orgies. I become embarrassed by even one person. Inadvertently, I once attended an orgy. I was so embarrassed I refused to take my clothes off. But I immediately got on the phone, called my best friend, described everything that was going on. Yes, it was fantastic. Now, seriously though, if you remember in Suddenly Last Summer, I alluded to young Sebastian's orgies on the beach at Cabeza del Lopo. Actually, it was the beach in Barcelona. I was there around 1950. The poverty in Spain was terrible at that time. Well, the kids would come to the bathhouses and push their ways into your cabana and offer themselves to you. Well, you couldn't very well refuse to give them something, but I'm no pederast, and I don't regret having reproduced no children myself. There was insanity on 3 sides of my family and great eccentricity on the 4th, so who wants to reproduce under those circumstances? But I can't live either in a strictly homosexual world. Well, among writers, change the subject for a little while. Among writers, I've greatly admired Chekhov and Lawrence, but they're the only ones I think that probably had some effect on my work. Chekhov both as a dramatist and storyteller, and D.H. Lawrence, well, because of his understanding of sexuality, life in general, he was an idol of mine. Well, I consider him, and Hart Crane, to be the only pure life in modern letters. Oh, in my youth, I was fascinated by Strindberg and by Ibsen. I identified with them. And I liked O'Neill. But I found Desire Under the Elms incredibly bad writing, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should pick it up sometimes and look at it. You know, after my first success on Broadway, though, O'Neill wrote me a nice letter praising The Glass Menagerie and warning me of the depression that can follow sudden success and the fear that success would never come again. He knew himself from bitter experience. Hemingway to me was one of the very best. He was like a poet. You know, I always understood Hemingway the writer, but never Hemingway the man. I think both Hemingway and Fitzgerald had the elements of homosexuality in them, though neither was homosexual as far as I know. And Jane Bowles, that is how I would like to have written. She was a dear friend and had such style. Jane wrote the play In the Summer House. Of course, there was dear Carson McCullers. Until I met Carson, I didn't think I could ever write in the same room with another person, but I missed her when she wasn't facing me across the table. Carson was reworking her novel, Member of the Wedding, into a play while I was writing Summer and Smoke. Her physical presence was comforting to me because writing is a lonely occupation, and I couldn't imagine her not being there. I was acquainted with Faulkner. You know, I tried to engage him in conversation, but he would never participate. Very hard to converse with a person when they won't converse back. The only word I remember him saying was ain't. He was very partial to ain't. Let's see. Oh yes, of course. We mustn't forget to mention Truman Capote. He always lived in a fantasy, you know. That's it. That's all he gets, just a mention. Oh, little Truman was fun before he discovered the jet set. I always said little Truman's voice was so high it could only be detected by a bat. No, I don't drink very much these days. Just a little brandy in my coffee and an occasional vodka martini. Little white wine, that doesn't count. And some gin in my orange juice. Well, they tell me to be sober, but who can improve on a streetcar? I drink to escape the blue devils that poke at me from under my skin. Sometimes I curse those blue devils, but I could never banish them, for they are me. You know, I don't know if I'm good for my work. When people meet me, I think they like my work less. I have often disappointed. To know me is not to love me, at best it's to tolerate me. My dog is the only one of my animals that likes me. I have 2 parrots and they don't like anyone, especially each other, and they use terrible language. My cat likes some people. Well, they say that animals love the person who feeds them. Even when I feed my animals, they don't love me. Sometimes I think of selling my house in Key West, but I have to keep it for my animals. They have no place else to go. Oh, that reminds me of Madame Sophia, my English bulldog. She was a particular favorite of mine. She used to travel everywhere with me, but she liked Paris best because there I could take her with me to all the great restaurants, though she preferred the bistro and the patisserie places because her favorite thing in life was croissants. She would go from table to table, pitifully begging croissants as though I'd never fed her. Oh, she was wonderful. But I blame myself because too much traveling isn't good for a dog. It shortened her life. Oh, I never met an animal I didn't like, and that includes the 2-legged variety. Madame Sophia. She also reminds me of the 60s. The 60s, the snake pit years. What I call my stone age. Everything just went wrong. I remember a line from Dante. I used it in Camino Real. In the middle of the journey of our life, I came to myself in a dark wood where the straight way was lost. How prophetic. The 60s were a nightmare. I think they began with the long and appalling tour of Night of the Iguana. It was like watching the demolition of a house, your own house, not being able to do anything about it. I also lost Frank. Frank was my dear longtime friend, the only person I ever felt sexually secure with. I had met him around the time of the streetcar. We lived together for 14 years. But as early as 1960, Frankie suddenly began to lose his vitality and turn moody. Well, I attributed his erratic behavior to drugs. You tried to hide that, you know. But I didn't know he was ill. He became less and less tolerant of my unimportant little one-night stands. Our relationship began to deteriorate. The fact that passion passes should not, however, be regarded as proof of its inconsequence. I left. But when I learned he had lung cancer and only 6 months to live, I was stricken with remorse and rushed back. I've been asked many times in interviews to name the greatest persons I've known. And I suppose because of my own fame or notoriety, they expect me to name writers, artists, presidents. The greatest person I have ever known was Frankie Merlo. Not only because of the way he lived his life, but especially for the way he died so bravely in 1963. We were living in New York in an apartment on East 65th Street. He was so sick he wouldn't even let me stay in the same room with him, but each night, this is particularly painful to remember, he would lock the bedroom door. Why? Was it to keep me out? It was death he thought he was locking out. Off and on during the night, I'd hear these terrible fits of coughing, but I didn't dare call out to him. He didn't want anyone near him. But Frankie did not die alone, though a certain magazine wrote that I couldn't stand it anymore and left him, which was a vicious lie. They wrote this perfectly scandalous piece about me. They called me a monster. Well, I suppose I have been a monster at times. Some will attest to that. But I wasn't a monster then, not with him. They even said that I cut my mother out of my will. She was never in it. The real monsters were the delinquents who would race past me on the street shouting, "Queer, faggot." Among the unsophisticated, there still exists a conspiracy to destroy the sensitive people of the earth. Frankie was very happy to have me there. But the only one he'd allow in the room was our other dog, little Gigi, a bull terrier. Each day around noon, they would emerge from the bedroom and then sit all day long on the love seat, watching TV. And they both had that same stoical expression on their faces. Then he went for the last time to the hospital. As he dressed to go, I entered the bedroom, but he would accept no assistance. The hospital, they'd put him in a ward where all the patients were dying. It was a nightmare. Appalling. I begged him not to stay there, to at least take a private room, but he said, "It doesn't matter anymore. I think I like being here with them." Finally, his condition worsened, and they did move him to a private room. He was on oxygen. Couldn't breathe, gasping for breath. He was so nervous he wouldn't stay still. Every few minutes he would stumble restlessly to a chair, then sit a while, and then fall back into the bed. Well, I asked him to lie still, but he said, "I feel too restless. The visitors have tired me so." Well, I asked him if he wanted me to go. And he said, "No, I'm used to you." And he turned on his side away from me and seemed to go to sleep. Later that night, he died. The last time I saw Frankie was at his 2 funerals. The first funeral was a Catholic service, high Requiem Mass, arranged by his family. The second was at the Frank Campbell Funeral Home. It was full. I invited all his theater friends. He was there in the open coffin, looking strangely handsome. He wasn't sick anymore. I was standing there remembering back to our early days together, and his sister came up to me and said, "Go touch his hand. He would like that." Well, the person there in that coffin didn't really seem to be Frankie, just someone who looked exactly like him, and Sometimes when someone tells you to do something that you don't really want to do, you just go ahead and do it because it seems easier that way, and until you've done it, you don't quite realize how much you didn't want to. When I touched his cold hand, it was one of the most shocking moments of my life. He'd always had warm hands. Frankie used to go everywhere with me. Once Jack Warner entertained us in his private dining room at Warner Brothers. When he got off the phone, he turned to Frankie and said, "Well, what do you do, young man?" Quietly, but clearly, he answered, "I sleep with Mr. Williams." You want to know what loneliness is? It's not having anyone to laugh with. And Frankie was my someone to laugh with. You can cry alone, but you can't laugh alone. Well, you can, but then they come and lock you up. If you folks will excuse me for just a few moments. You know why? Still, after all these years, I've great guilt over how badly I neglected Frankie during the last years of our relationship. But the person we are most likely to hurt is the one we care most about. And Frank was the one person who genuinely cared for me. Not because I was Tennessee Williams. I have often wondered what is perfect love. I believe it is to have a person to whom you could tell the worst thought you've ever had, who could know about you the thing of which you're most ashamed and would think none the less of you for it. That was Frank. Robert Anderson wrote a telling line in one of his plays. Death ends a life, but it does not end a relationship. How true. That old cliche is also true. It is better to have loved and lost, even if you have to pay for it the rest of your life with an empty feeling. Part of me was buried in that coffin. After his death, I went into a terrible, almost clinical depression. I was stoned all the time. I suppose it would be more noble to say that my breakdown was caused by the tragedy of one person's loss, but that wasn't so. My personal life was always less personal for me than the life of my work. Success in the theater, maybe just one decent review could have saved me. But the more you need something, the harder it is to get. I don't think I ever got a decent review after Night of the Iguana. I told myself that in a review was just the words of one person and doesn't really matter, but I didn't believe it. I remembered every damning word and gave each one of them immortality in my own mind. Everything went to pieces, privately and professionally. First, my heart broke. Eventually, more crucial, my mind broke. But the most revealing thing happened during my breakdown. I found myself abandoned. Everyone always said, "You have so many friends." Apparently, some of them were friends of my success. I didn't exist. People seem to regard mental illness not just as an antisocial disease, but as contagious. Perhaps depression is. After all, what is life but a story that has to have a sad ending, and we don't want to be reminded of that. I was worse than buried. I was forgotten. But my sanity returned at least as much as I've ever had. I've never been quite sure who's sane and who isn't, but man, that's another story. Of course, I still have times when I behave hysterically, but I've always been that way, and I was only interested in work. Work. The loveliest of all four-letter words, surpassing even the importance of love most times. Oh, I'm sure I was much further gone than I was aware of being, but when you're under sedation constantly, drugs permit you to hide from reality, to escape from depression. Running away from reality is what my breakdown was all about. But I couldn't escape. I couldn't escape the voices in my head, so I took drugs, hoping to soften the voices, silence them. Used alcohol instead of water to wash the pills down. Well, that did it. That took me out of it. Every evening under sedation, in the mornings I took a speed, uppers, anything to give me the energy to write. Eventually, I went back to Key West in an attempt to bring some sanity back in my life. I was brewing the ritual morning black coffee, the caffeine kick that had always nurtured and sustained me when even coffee betrayed me. I was using the stove in the patio because workmen were erecting a new kitchen and it was taking 4 months, which is too long an erection for anyone. Anyway, the Silex slipped. Well, I should say I slipped, which wasn't hard to do considering I was pickled in pills and alcohol. I fell. I was naked and I scalded my upper body very severely, particularly burning my right shoulder. Well, the disastrous result of that mini drama was that it led some people to doubt I could take care of myself. Anyone could have an accident, but no, I ended up in the loony bin, and do you know that they put me in the violent ward and I wasn't even violent. They said I was violent. You'd be violent if they did that to you. If you aren't violent to get out, it means you are insane. It's amazing how strong people are, what they can survive. You have to survive to come out. And I'm a survivor. Didn't even realize I wanted to survive until I was there. Then I knew I had to, because I could not let them win. When you're in such a place, you feel invaded. You're stripped of all personal privacy. They endeavor to leave you exposed and naked, not only physically, but psychologically and emotionally. They said I was violent. It would be foolhardy for a man of my physical stature to be overly belligerent, though certainly I will not hesitate to physically defend myself or those I love. In such a situation, held by force, not knowing when or if you will leave, one is so desperate for any show of affinity or human kindness amidst the suffering and interminable boredom. When they locked me up, there was one woman in the asylum who was always very kind to me. She was a big black woman called Sugar. Whenever she saw me, her face glowed with a warmth that was welcome indeed in that cold-hearted place. It was a tender look. Little gestures that in some ways reminded me of Ozzie, the black lady who took care of my sister Rose and me and was our childhood confidant and playmate. Well, the others warned me about Sugar. They said that she was not so sweet, but I felt they only wanted to take away what little I had. Then one day, she looked warmly at me, smiling slightly. I passed close to her, and as I did, she hit me really hard, and I reeled. Not so much from the physical blow. What really hurt was the betrayal. She was much bigger than I and really strong. But she had hit me for absolutely no reason at all. Oh, I suppose there was a reason, but one which existed only in her head, nothing I could fathom. In that situation, there is a pervasive distortion of perspective. It doesn't seem that something like that happening to you in the insane asylum would matter that much. But when you're there, it becomes your world. The asylum comes to seem to you like it is the whole world, because it is your whole world. But I'm okay now. I don't hurt anymore. Just labor pain. You know, I try not to criticize the critics. It does no good. Sometimes I feel that it's my responsibility to explain something to them. After one of my plays closed, I wrote what was meant to be a constructive letter to Brendan Gill, one of the critics who seemed to understand my work. Oh, I did go on. It must have been 20 pages long. I wonder what he did with it. I hope I mailed it. But I have gotten so angry at some of those critics, I allowed them to practically paralyze me. I know that they only read the power they have is the power we give them, but they love that power. If when they flay us, we could only learn to grow new skin. But when they come after you to knock you down, it means that you are someone. Critics still want me to be a poetic realist, and I never was. If they want a realist, they'll just have to get themselves another playwright. I suppose that's what they did. But if I see an audience leaning back in their seats for 2.5 hours, and I know I have failed to catch the climaxes, the crises, the confrontations of heightened life, theater isn't life. Life is very slow. Life is often better when it's boring. Theater isn't, believe me. I'm very conscious of my decline in popularity, but I do not permit it to stop me because I have the strength of many playwrights before me. I know the dreadful notices Ibsen got, and O'Neill, he had to die to make Moon for the Misbegotten successful. It has been providential for me to be an artist. A great act of providence that I was able to turn my psychosis into creativity. My sister Rose did not manage this, so I keep on writing. I write because I have to. I can't stop. There isn't anything else I can do. Even if no one had ever bought anything I've done, I would still be writing. It's beyond a compulsion. I shall continue to go on writing no matter what the critics say. Critics. Critics are like eunuchs in a harem. They're there every night. They see it done every night. They see how it should be done every night, but they can't do it themselves. Ooh, I didn't say that. Brendan Bean did. We better change the subject, though. I'm in enough trouble with the critics already. You know, one of the happiest times of my life was, well, you never guess, 1939. I was a feather picker on a squab farm near Los Angeles. Squabs had their throats cut, and then they were held over a bucket and they bled to death. I couldn't do that, Carl. I couldn't kill anything. After the bird was dead, I would pluck its feathers. We were paid per feather. I made very little money. Lived in a little cabin, ate beans and stolen avocados. But I was happy. There was no pressure. I never felt the drive to compete. I just existed. I had escaped from life. Those were careless times. C-A-R-E-L-E-S-S. Careless. Careless is the best time in a person's life. Once you lose that, you can never be happy again, no matter what success comes. For the Broadway opening of the Glass Menagerie, I don't remember feeling any great sense of triumph. In fact, I don't really remember it very well at all. It should have been one of the happiest nights of my life. I'd like to have that night again now, perhaps enjoy it more. Oh, I did make someone happy. My mother was pleased by my delayed success. Not by the delay, but that it came at all. She should have been. She got 50% of the royalties. And as I recall, there was only one important dissenting voice on Glass Menagerie. George G. Nathan, who said that the play hardly mattered except for the performance of Laurette Taylor, to whom he'd sent a bottle of liquor on opening night, an odd gift to send to an alcoholic. She wrote it back in thanks for the vote of confidence. This is the same George G. Nathan who had come up to me during rehearsals and said, "You don't know how to write drama. You're really just a good short story writer who doesn't understand the theater." I don't even know why I bothered to remember that. After the success of Menagerie, as O'Neill had warned, I felt a great depression. Probably because I never believed anything good would continue. And I'd spent so much energy on the climb to success that once I'd made it and my play was the hottest ticket in town, I felt almost no satisfaction. Sudden success is startling and you have to adjust to it. Of course, once you've known success, it's even more difficult to adjust to the loss of it. Fame can be agreeable, but I think it was poisonous for me. Fame. It's ephemeral. Emily Dickinson wrote, "Fame is a bee. It has a song, it has a sting, alas, it has a wing." One never understands what makes it come or go. If success comes at all, you've been lucky. Of course, I've never had any expectations of being anything, let alone famous, rich. But those who say that poverty is good for the soul weren't ever very poor. They would know better. Poverty for too long is deforming. It's humiliating. I know it seems natural to be inspired and encouraged by success, but I believe I've always been pushed by the negative. The apparent failure of a play sends me back to the typewriter that very night, even before the reviews are out. I'm more compelled to get back to work than if I had success. Though I have this anger in me without its being specifically directed. Writing is my punching bag. My character is anger and endurance. Everything a writer of fiction creates has to come out of himself. What we write may develop in a heightened or exaggerated form, but it's usually something we experience or observe. Sometimes I think I only live so I'll have something to write about. You know, people think an exciting life just happens to you. It isn't so. Lord Byron's line in Camino Reel, "Make voyages, attempt them. There's nothing else." It's one of my favorite lines into my philosophy of life. An exciting, adventurous life is not easy to find. You have to work at it all the time. I have a dream which has been very much part of my life. I'm in a grandstand waiting for something wonderful to happen. I hear the music of the calliope. I'm very happy, and I think, now the parade. The parade is just about to begin. And all of a sudden I sense someone standing there next to me. A dark figure of authority. I look up and I'm told to move. It started to rain and the parade has been canceled. But I look around the stands. I see that I'm all alone, but I remain there waiting obstinately. This dream seems more real than reality. It's more a part of my life than what has really happened. And what I've learned in life is that only dreams are true. Blanche says it for me. I don't want realism, I want magic. I don't tell the truth, I tell what ought to be the truth. Magic is very precious in life. I spent my life waiting for something wonderful to happen. I haven't too much longer to wait now. You reach a certain age, you don't even want to open your address book anymore. I know in my work I have always had a fascination for death and a fascination for sexuality. I wouldn't say they're my predominant theme. Loneliness is. Loneliness, my greatest affliction. All the days, nights of my life, I think I've been lonely. There are also a few times in one's life when one has that closeness with another person, man or woman. The bedroom is either the loveliest room or the most abhorrent. I judge a person more by his or her bedroom than by any other room. But finding someone to share your bed is a lot easier than finding someone you want to wake up with. My grandmother's name was Rose. My sister was named for her. What has pleased me most in life is being able to make someone I care about happy. It's not easy to make anyone happy, even yourself, especially yourself. But the best thing my success and money has given me, the best moment in my life, was being able to rescue my sister Rose from this horrible asylum where her memory had been destroyed by a lobotomy, where they were punishing her, claiming she'd attacked some woman. My sister never did a deliberately unkind thing in her life. Poor Rose. She said some shocking thing to Mother. Miss Edwina was very puritanical and hated sex. Her mother used to scream when our father had sex with her, and we children were terrified. Rose said something Mother didn't like. Some silly little thing about the young girls in the convent school stealing the candles from chapel and using them for their own amusement. Then she said something about our father having made sexual suggestions to her. Mother became hysterical. "Cut that filth from her mind," she screamed. Mother always liked doctors, so she was easily persuaded by a doctor. Thus, dear Rose became a pioneer in the lobotomy operation. She had first or second, I don't remember. They said it would calm her down. Miss Edwina often did the wrong thing, but she did what she believed was the right thing to do. My sister and I were always very close. But just the moment she needed me, I was off groping for my own way. It was not there for her. She was a warm person and craved appreciation and love, as we all do, only some need more desperately than others. There was a young gentleman who would call on Miss Rose. She was deeply in love with him. She nearly expired every time the phone rang. And one day he just suddenly stopped calling. Cruel. How could anyone be so cruel? It was the start of her decline. There's nothing more terrible than deliberate cruelty. I have never understood those who perpetuate it. I like Blanche's line. Deliberate cruelty is not forgivable. It is the one unforgivable thing. The only things I really regret in my life are times when I was cruel. But I've been hurt far more by cruelty I inflicted than by any cruelties ever inflicted on me. Let me warn you about something. I don't usually offer unsolicited advice, but perhaps I can save one of you the kind of pain that has haunted me. Have you ever said something to someone and then wished you could unsay it? You know, those words you'd like to take back, but can't. Never leave someone you love having hurt them. Something might happen to prevent your saying later you're sorry. That happened to me. My sister was the most important person in my life, and I hurt her just when she most needed me. I had a little party at our house one weekend while our parents were away. You know how those things are, got a little out of hand. The drinking, I mean. We were young. Rose was like a frightened bird, and she hated liquor because of our father's drinking. When our parents got home, she tattled to them, and I was told I couldn't have those particular friends over anymore. Well, they were the only friends I had. I got angry. I spoke those words in a moment that I've not been able to erase with my whole life. I went past her on the stairs. She looked into my eyes. I loved her, but I forgot that at that moment. I never want to see your ugly face again, I said to her. It was just when Miss Rose needed me the most that I betrayed her. After that, everything got worse. While I was away, they performed that terrible operation, and she could never understand that I was sorry, because she could never understand what it was that had transpired that I was sorry for. Only death can release me from my guilt. Strange, those friends who were at the party now. I can hardly remember who they were. Ironic, too, you know, years later, Mother had to be put away in one of those terrible places. She had fantasies. She thought she had haunts in the room with her. But I didn't let them keep her there. Why? She wasn't going to harm anyone. She'd done the harm already. She meant well. But some of the worst things that have ever been done have been done by people who meant well, but were exceedingly foolish. Miss Edwina, she could best be described as a Prussian general. An inefficient Prussian general. I bought her a house in Florida so she could be near me, but she thought that the rockets from Cape Canaveral were falling in her yard. She wanted me to go to Washington to speak to the president. One night she went screaming from the house. Frankie finally found her crouched in someone's yard under a tree like some ancient Ophelia, combing the fallout out of her hair. My father, such an unhappy man. Perhaps that's one of the things I've learned from him, how to be unhappy. Unhappiness can be learned, like a bad habit. Terrible to be so unhappy not to be able to do anything about it. Of course, I didn't understand that at the time. He cared more what the world outside his family thought of him than what his own family thought. When he died, my brother Dakin and I went back to Knoxville to bury him. I thought I'd have mixed feelings about his death, but I didn't. Actually, at the end, I found I loved the old son of a bitch till they read the will. You know what he left me in his will? Right, not a goddamn thing. But my sister Rose is the survivor of the family. She survived those years before I could rescue her. But once I had a little money, besides being able to keep her out of a public institution, I was able to buy her the pretty dresses she always loved. I used to love to look in the shop windows with her when we were both very young, before that great harm befell her. And although she couldn't afford to buy the dresses we admired, she loved to look in the windows. Now I buy her the dresses and she wears them in her mind. Once I received an invitation to Buckingham Palace and I thought of taking Miss Rose with me. Well, it would give her a chance to wear her beautiful dresses, so I asked her if she wanted to meet the Queen of England and have tea with her at Buckingham Palace. She just looked at me and said, "I am the Queen of England." Suppose if you live in a dream world, you might as well live in it as a queen. In some ways, her world is superior to ours. Nobody who knew my day-to-day life would envy me. But I hope no one ever pities me. I hate self-pity. I try not to be bitter. Everyone has their own problems, all of you, your own reasons for being unhappy. I was happy till I was 8. But I do have a good disposition. Don't you think I have a good disposition? Oh, I have to tell you this. It's so silly and stupid. Recently I was in the south of France with my dear friend Sylvia Miles. She's very well acquainted socially. We were lying on the beach at Cannes, and this very skinny girl emerges from the water wearing this little bikini. Sylvia takes one look at her and says, "Now that's anorexia nervosa." I said, "Oh, Sylvia, you know everybody." But you know, originally on my father's side of the family, they were Catholic. Of course, I didn't become a Catholic until my brother Dakin had me converted during one of my many deathbed scenes. I fooled him, though, and lived. Became as good a Catholic as I had been an Episcopalian. You know, I don't understand everything they teach, but the one thing that worries me is extreme unction. Extreme unction? When that priest comes at you with that, you know you bought the farm. But I'm not afraid of dying, not anymore. You get used to it. I have been told I was going to die so many times, and I have come close to death so many times that I've just grown accustomed to it. Oh, I'm afraid of many things, but the things of which I'm afraid are not physical, but psychological and emotional. And I believe it's like the sleepy person being ready to sleep. If you have insomnia, it's because you're really not ready to sleep, even though you think you are. When you're ready to sleep, you do. It's the same with death. Close shaves with death are fascinating. You think you'll be overwhelmed by the fear, but it isn't like that at all. The fear is eclipsed by the violence of one's struggle to hang on. Gladiators had that thrill. There's a kind of exhilaration to it. Of course, once you've had a close brush with death, you never think the same as before. I no longer believe in being frugal with money, time, or energy because there are no guarantees in life. I never know where I'll be tomorrow or even if I'll be. Of course, in my case, knowing you're deceased will bring you a moment of prominence in the media. Well, that does give one a strange feeling. But my obituary is shrinking all the time in the New York Times. Yeah, but perhaps I'll have another hit first, and then it will be more valuable, and they'll restore some of the paragraphs. No, I'm told that if one outlives one's moment of greatest fame, one's obituary starts shrinking. Makes people feel superior, and perhaps even immortal to read about the death of someone else, especially someone famous. But it is then that we know we have also lost our greatest luxury, the feeling of limitless future that is youth. Any artist dies two deaths, that of his physical self and that of his creative power. Thus, the important part of me is really already dead. But a man competes with others, and he competes with himself, and they take your measure. You're always being measured. But I'm a fighter. I've come a long way from St. Louis. I've never been the passive person. I do have violence in me, but it is verbal. And do you know why I look forward to death? For death is the release from competition. Death is the one thing no one competes for. There's probably no competition after you get there. But who's happy? Is anyone happy? Happiness is insensitivity. It's a wonderful feeling to make someone happy, but it's not very easy to do, and people never let you know if you please them. Why is that? You try very hard to do so, and they leave you suspended, not knowing. Why do they begrudge you your little bit of satisfaction? I'm always looking for a place to be happy. Always seems to be some place I might go to. Never the place I'm in. I'm thinking now it might be New Mexico or Tangier. I used to think it was New Orleans, except when I got there. Whenever I'm in New York, I can't wait to get back to Key West. When I'm in Key West, I think about the trip to New York. I'm rather excited about it until I get there. Now, death seems to be the trip I most look forward to. Doesn't offer achievement or excitement, but it does offer peace. I think so. Perhaps even death won't live up to my expectations. Laughter. Laughter has always been my substitute for lamentation, and I would laugh as loudly as I would lament if I hadn't found a useful substitute for weeping. And then the final analysis, isn't all of life just an attempt to escape loneliness? The search for another warm body, with a warm mind. That's the ultimate sex, if it can ever be achieved. That's when the Nightingale really sings. Whatever I've done, that is of some value, has survived, if anything survives in the theater. And I have in mind that what, in effect, I do now belongs to those who come after me. And despite all my torment and ghosts of yesterday, I have remained faithful to one thing: my love for the theater. And if I could choose my spot to die, it would be in a Broadway theater on opening night, listening to the wild ovation at the end of my newest play. That would be an unusual ending for a Tennessee Williams play, though, wouldn't it? A happy one. Yeah, but only fiction can offer happy endings. Thank you.